The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
We're going to get you across Israel's strikes on Iran, Iran's strikes on Israel, and US President Donald Trump's maybe strikes on Iran. It's dominated the news this week.
This is a decades-old conflict. The potted history is that Israel and Iran cooperated on a wide range of issues before Iran's 1979 revolution. But after that, the Islamic Republic adopted what the foreign affairs experts call anti-US and anti-Israel postures. And it's been very tense ever since.
Yeah, very tense ever since. And to get to what's happened in the last week, last Friday, the first Israeli attacks targeted the Iranian nuclear program, also their military leadership. Put very simply, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time.
Yeah, have a listen to the shortcut from Tuesday if you want more details on that. There's been a bit of a build-up on the issue of Iran's nuclear capabilities. It's something that we've been hearing about for a number of years. For its part, Iran insists that its nuclear program is peaceful, that they're not trying to develop an atomic bomb, and its foreign minister called Israel's strikes in the last week a declaration of war.
Yeah, I guess one question to address is why can't Iran have nuclear weapons? Israel is said to have nuclear weapons. That's never actually been confirmed. Not that I'm cheerleading for Iran or for anyone to have nuclear weapons, but I was just curious about that question.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. It's a bit of an open secret, isn't it, that Israel has been developing these weapons since I think about the 60s. Iran has signed international treaties saying that it won't develop nuclear weapons. Last weekend, the G7 leaders gathered in Canada and they issued a statement saying we've been consistently clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. They called Iran the principal source of regional instability and terror, and they backed Israel's right to defend itself.
And we then get to Thursday. US President Donald Trump weighed in on this, saying that Iran was a few weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. He's at odds, actually, with his National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard. A few weeks ago, she fronted a Senate committee and testified that Iran didn't have that capability and wasn't going to get close to that capability anytime soon. This week, Trump said he doesn't care what she thinks.
Yeah, very confusing for all of us who don't have access to any of this intel. We'll get to the internal issues for Trump in a sec, but to keep on track with what's unfolded over the week, the two sides have traded strikes. Israel's operation is called Rising Lion. Iran's is called True Promise 3. According to Iranian authorities, at least 224 people have been killed, but human rights groups have reported significantly higher figures than that. In Israel, officials report 24 deaths and more than 840 people wounded so far.
There's said to be widespread panic amongst civilians, certainly looking at some of the accounts from Australians who have been in Israel. They're certainly talking about the days being okay, but the nights being particularly terrifying. So far, there's no sign of either side backing down.
Yeah, President Trump, we mentioned before, he's been a central figure in all of this. He's been considering whether to join Israel's strikes on Iran's nuclear sites if it doesn't declare an unconditional surrender.
A lot of speculation about that, and fair to say too that Trump actually fueled a lot of that speculation. Towards the start of the week, he said, I may do it, I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do. And as we started on Friday, his spokeswoman had fronted the media overnight and said that they would allow a 2-week sort of window for diplomacy before deciding whether they're going to go and launch any sort of US strikes in Iran.
Yeah, another element involving Trump that's fanned the conflict is that he and Netanyahu have raised the idea of assassinating Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Trump said that he was an easy target.
Yeah, and just on Khamenei, he's a religious figure, but he has a lot more power than Iran's president, than any political figure in the country. He's also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, which I didn't quite realise until now. I thought that was a wing of government or the political sort of institutions that were able to do that. But as commander-in-chief, it's a really interesting sort of dynamic there. He doesn't command, though, the support of all of Iranians. and his people are divided. That division, according to reports, is only deepening.
Yeah, as a Squiz podcast listener, I know that you've spoken a lot in recent times about the unprecedented protests across Iran against that ultra-conservative leadership.
Yeah, it's also an element in all of this. So this division inside Iran, you might remember Iran's president was killed in a helicopter crash last year. His replacement is considered to be quite moderate. So it suggests, whether there's going to be an overthrow of the regime, that's the big question. But it certainly does suggest that many Iranians don't support this really sort of hardline religious regime that really has presided over Iran for quite some time now. As for Khamenei, he's said to be in hiding. Trump says that he knows where he is. And this is his quote, "We are not going to take him out, at least for now."
Iran is the sponsor of the terror groups Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. So the anti-Israel, anti-Western militias that form the axis of resistance in that region. And the killing of Khamenei would be huge. That would be something else.
Oh, something else entirely. It would take conflict into a whole other realm. Another thing to note is that Iran is not the only one facing division. We pointed to Trump and Tulsi Gabbard before. Trump supporters are not on the same page when it comes to this. So part of Trump's political brand is this sort of US first, America first agenda, and for the US to stay out of other nations' wars. He's talked a lot about that in his time in politics, particularly in the Middle East. So getting out of Afghanistan, of course, was one of the really big things that they talked about. So the prospect of going back into a war in the Middle East is something else entirely. A US strike against Iran, the prospect of that has kicked up a lot of dust in American politics.
Yeah, I saw a poll in The Economist this week, and it was done last weekend. It showed that 53% of voters who backed Trump in the last election at the end of last year don't want the country to join in Israel's strikes. So that's a majority, a slim one, but most people are saying we don't want American lives on the line and we don't want all the money that goes into these sort of conflicts.
Exactly. And look, one thing we do know about Trump when it comes to polls and being liked, he likes to be liked. So the experts say that the threat of the United States joining could just be a negotiating tactic as well. So look, lots of questions still to answer.